Marinva, good morning, welcome, good morning. These conversations were born out of COP26 when I was one of 10 SEDA members present as official observers and participating in other side activities. And there, we saw how Scotland's story is only one small chapter in the global debate about how we respond to the climate and biodiversity emergency that we've created and how we can create our path to a better future.
Thanks to our colleagues from Denmark, from the Danish Energy Agency, who have made the journey to be here to share their experiences and their knowledge of the transition in a country with a population and a climate not wildly different from Scotland's. We've got a memorandum of understanding with Denmark, and it's provided a foundation for really valuable engagement, drawing on the experience that our colleagues have to share and making sure that we learn some of the lessons that have been experienced there.
First of all, Danish Energy Agency, 1,000 people working in Copenhagen, mostly with the national green agenda. Different countries we work with Ethiopia, we work with the US, we work with UK, but all partnerships have a very strong focus on clever green regulation.
For me, it's important to have buildings that are sustainable in such a way it's designed for people to live in the buildings. It's healthy for the people, at the same time being energy efficient, such as we don't consume too much and therefore have a reduced CO2 emissions.
I think what I would like to emphasize is that Scotland and Denmark working together, that is definitely a strong collaboration, because we can inspire each other, both on the solutions, as you mentioned, but also maybe on the turns not to take.
In 2010, we started implementing this low energy class system in the Danish building code, and in 2018, the value was set as low as 27 kilowatt hours per square meters, and this value is actually still valid today. This low energy class system that we implemented made us do a political strategy which put a focus into sustainability. We then put the sustainability requirement target into our building code and has now already planned targets for the future in 25, 27 and in 29. The construction industry also created a report on the recommendations to the Danish government based on the climate partnership that they engaged in. And the report come up with recommendations on how the construction industry can be reduced by 5.8 million tons of CO2 per year. It was quite expensive to make LCA calculations, and the LCA Byg tool was developed back in 2015. Now the tool has all of the necessary features in it to comply with our Danish building code, and you can also choose to comply with the voluntary class, and the tool is constantly being updated to be up to date to the new requirements in the building code, and it's greatly used across the also educational system and in the construction companies to use, because it's free and really simple to use.
Scottish Net Zero Public Sector Building Standard target for embodied carbon is the same as your baseline one for all buildings, and that's only happening on number of buildings that's probably in the 2 digits. Someone in the room can tell me the exact number. So how do we go through that scale of moving from where we are to widespread commercial deployment, and should we be investing in public tools or should we be investing elsewhere?
So I'm Dr. Yannick Gieskim from the University of Strathclyde. I'm a Chancellor's Fellow there, and I've been working on embodied whole life carbon assessment, the circular economy for quite a long time now. So I've come to be part of all these conversations, understand all the different perspectives that are going on how we deliver a just transition in the built environment in Scotland.
So in order to come to this point that we have in Denmark, we have had a lot of help from the industry and the public. We have spent a lot of money and effort into putting knowledge into the public sector and the industry that this is an important way for Denmark to move forward.
For me, it's about taking tangible steps and having the right drivers in place to enable that transition. For example, the one I'd like to see Scotland move forward on a lot quicker is bringing embodied and whole life carbon assessment requirements into our building standards. This is something that's already happened in Denmark and Sweden and France, the Netherlands, Norway and a number of other places. It's going to be coming in across the EU for all buildings over 1,000 square metres from 2028 and for all buildings from 2030. That means we've got essentially somewhere between 4 and 6 years to figure out what the equivalent approach is going to be in Scotland. Now, we're not starting from scratch. We already have things like the RICS professional statement, which tells us how to go about doing these assessments. But what we don't have is any real driver to do them. It's being done on a voluntary basis. And I think that's something that is going to have to change. If we want people to be doing routine, standardised assessments, it's going to have a regulatory basis. So Scottish building standards should be doing what many of these other countries have already done. That's understanding and setting out a pathway for bringing in requirements, starting to require reporting, which enables people to understand the process better, and then ultimately you can use that to place limits and drive down that carbon over time.
Putting campaigns out is an important one from our experience, that this is the way to move forward. It also puts some ideas into the industry that they can now play around with these more fun designs, and because it might be a requirement in future, so they can start as these pilot projects.
Your colleague mentioned like campaigns and things like that, so I just wondered if you could maybe share any kind of thoughts or tips on communication.
In Denmark, the climate issue is very much on the top of everybody's mind. In the country, as a population, yes. In the countryside, it will be farmers thinking about CO2 taxes on their emissions. In the city centers, it will be young people, but also middle-aged people, talking about how can we reduce our CO2 emissions. It's very much a thing. The last election we had in Denmark, we called that a climate election. It's one of the top priorities, taking care of our elders and our children and our sick people, of course, and then climate and energy issues. That's at least one thing that is quite important. So there's also kind of like a demand from the society that things are green, and people want to, most of the time, put money into having a more green product, right? There's a business case in that. And then with the campaigns, it's actually quite simple campaigns in the television and in Facebook and all this, talking about if you save electricity, you save money. It's almost like a calculation. If you remember to do this, or if you remember to have a good refrigerator or isolated windows and all this, it's actually directly money into your private wallet.
The efforts you're making to reduce the CO2 per square metre, I wonder, is there also a thing where you're trying to reduce the square metres, so building less, and how do we balance those two up, and the discussion with industry about that?
That's a big discussion in Denmark, because we are building bigger and bigger, and we like spacing our buildings. It would be interesting to put a square meters allowed for the number of people or number of room in the building or something like that, but it's hard to compromise the big size of building and then complying with the CO2 equivalent, because that's on per square meters. So it could be a strategy to put like an overall limit or something on a building.
I'm interested in how you have managed this in terms of the workforce dynamics. One challenge we have here is in understanding and building the skills within the workforce that will be necessary to meet higher building regulations or to use different construction materials. And I wonder if you could maybe say a bit about whether or not that has been a relatively straightforward journey in Denmark, and maybe what the share of the responsibility has been between government and industry in building that up.
We educate young engineers in order for them to be very, you can say, frontier within sustainable buildings. It's actually something that the Danish government is pushing forward. All these very much education engineers. And then young people, they want to work within these areas also. Yes.
I'm really impressed, for example, at the level of detail there is. There are figures on everything. And is that a good starting point for stuff that Scotland can learn from Denmark, or are there other things that you think that we can learn from them, or perhaps they can learn from us?
The Nordics, I think there is the Nordic folk high school kind of thing. There's something really about the cultural identity and the community and the sharing. I think they've got over the idea of transparency in terms of wages all being available online and all that sort of thing. So I think we've got a bit of kind of hidden corners that we don't want to shine lights into too much in our country and in lots of countries, and that's created more kind of either competitive, holding on to something of value that I can then make money out of, or I don't want to share too much because I might give away. So I think there's something. Changing culture is even more of a challenge than probably changing structural aspects of our contracting in our industry, but I think it is a key aspect of it. What comes first? Does the cultural memories that we used to have of community and of sharing and of connection return through education and socialisation, and having, I suppose, harmonisation of standards, of legislation, of procurement, of value?
What is the general sense in Denmark? Is it all of us first, so we all benefit from it, or is it me first?
I like to say that it is the society first. Yes, it is. But of course there's also me first. And I think a very important part of the Danish success is the dialogue between the political level, the regulator implementing level, and then the society and the businesses. I mean, there really is a very transparent dialogue, as you're saying, so that businesses, they know kind of what regulation and what funds to expect for the next 10 years. And a lot of the governments that we have had in power, they are somewhat agreeing on the green agenda. So that makes for a very, you can say, clear path. It just doesn't go, all directions. So you, as a business, you actually dare to invest in green solutions. And then what I also think is quite important is that, and I can just talk about Denmark and not so much about Scotland, but in Denmark, we are very much focused on what is the green business case for businesses in this. It is very expensive in the beginning, but we are looking at what kind of business case is coming in the future.
It feels like there's a social contract that's gone on that seems to be really cohesive.
Yes.
And does that mean that there's more trust in the fact that any political party that's in power in Denmark will continue that? Because if they don't, there's an electorate that's saying, well, you're not for us. The climate agenda isn't just for greenwashing or lip service, it's absolutely fundamental.
It's also because in the 70s we were really scared of when there was that crisis with the Middle East, and all of a sudden fossil fuels were just rising, and we had to take all these precautions. But that actually started the idea of we need to be more self-sufficient. So we need the district heating, we need the wind turbines, we need a good connection to Sweden and Germany and going onwards to Europe. So it's also very much come out that in Denmark we don't have coal. We gave away our oil to Norway. Yeah. So we kind of needed...
It's about resilience almost, that you had to then say, you know what, we need to be more resilient as a country, so we can't talk about it, we have to do something about it.
We have to do something, yeah.
And we've got active, full frontal active lobbying in the opposite direction from private sector.
But they have in Denmark as well, though.
Yes.
And they've been taken to court as a result. Was it Royal Shell or whatever? So there is lobbying in the other direction.
Takes the government to court for it?
No, took the private sector company to court because they were not acting on the supposed commitments they'd made. So there's teeth coming, I think. But there is we should not ignore the vested interest in the status quo. There is business as usual that is making lots of people lots of money who have no intention of transitioning.
Yeah. So a lot of people in our political system feel powerless when you talk to very senior people. They feel that they are powerless to, in the face of this financing, the way our political systems finance.
What have you taken from this morning?
I suppose the glib answer is start in 1973. They have spent a long time doing a lot of this stuff better, and the response to the 70s energy crisis, they made the very rational decision to start doing things differently at that point. I think though that hopefully gives us a bit of a shortcut, because we get to learn some of the lessons that they took a long time to learn and take from the best of that. One of the frustrations that I get sometimes though is that people say, why can't we just do everything like Denmark, or whether it's on heat networks, or why can't we just do one solution? We're going to need to take a really wide range of solutions, including the best of what Denmark has done and other approaches, but also looking to try and stimulate innovation for the solutions that weren't available in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and that aren't available yet, but are going to have to be here in the next decade or two.
It seems that Denmark have really engaged with their people, and the people have got on board. Yeah. Now my observation from Scotland is that you can talk to 10 people in a room and ask them about net zero. You get 10 different answers what they think it means. I had the report that came out last week that we've missed the targets, and not just a small way, in a big way. And people start to go, what is going on? We need to communicate it in a way that people fully understand it, and that we make it realistic for them in terms of achievable targets in a timescale that is smart in terms of specific, measurable, attainable, realistic. Is the old acronym that we used to use.
Yes, we've got lots of great things to learn from what Denmark and other countries have done so far, even what we know about and have done in pockets to date around the country. But there has to be room for mistakes and growth in that. And I think that's a very difficult thing to translate to the media, and to bring people on that kind of journey. And I'm saying that because I don't quite know the solution to it.
We see the status quo as being normal, and we don't recognise that we're actually failing at the moment, and that any progress is a positive step.
Projects are not allowed to go wrong, and it's the real world, and they do, and there's a lot of fuss in the press. Does that actually happen in Denmark? Is there a
we're not only good. Obviously, we also do mistakes. You mentioned before the perspective, it has to be long, and it was in 2014 political strategy arose, but then before that the public sector and industry has been screaming about it, and then the government decided, okay, we need to do something about it. Then it took 10 years before we put it into our building code. So it has taken a long time, and within that we have also made failures.
From education, right the way from kindergarten up to becoming the adults that we're just talking about, I don't think that we're very good at teaching the basics about how we as humans interact with our environment. The impact of opening and closing windows, the impact of how you use your house, of drying your laundry inside and having your windows open or closed, these sorts of things. And I think that without being at all an expert in this, there is a sense that the forest schools and Nordic kindergartens and the way that the education system runs in Scandinavia is better at that, having a better, closer relationship to your environment and an understanding of heat and self and purpose and whatever. And I think there's something there, because we can create very good buildings that are then badly used. Mm-hmm. And we are then also trying to encourage and incentivize and explain to people what we want to be doing, who that audience perhaps is not best placed to understand the implications of what we're asking.
I applaud the cultural advantages that you're taking of a country that is not as polarised politically. That's a massive advantage. I don't know how that's come about, but in the UK, in the US, where I've spent a lot of my career, boy is it difficult. It's about collaboration, and that's why you're here, I believe, and I learn from you. I learn from you all.
Great to get into a room with people that are like-minded, that really want to make a difference, that want to reshape or change the future. I think there's probably tens of thousands out there like us, They just need a bit of direction and a bit of leadership, and we'll get there. Yes, I'm hopeful.
Make a collaboration. That's the first step. Get the industry and the government to speak together and make a common understanding of where you want to be in 1 year or and also in 10 years. And then make small steps. You learn from the steps you take, and you look back, and then you can make more bold moves in the end. We have already now set a target, and that's not come from one day to another. That's a lot of experience and small steps ahead.
Transparency and dialogue and good examples. So transparency in the regulation that we promote and the regulation that we want. Then we need the cooperation in order to be inspired by other good solutions around the world. And then lastly, we need to believe that we can make this happen, and that we can make a business case out of it, and that we can make a better world for the future to come.
I think it was mentioned pretty early on that collaboration can be quite insular. How much are we really trying to bring in and communicate learnings from other countries? And that's not just international, actually. It was mentioned, within the UK, there's good stuff going on that we're not really taking cognizance of.
There's an opportunity for Scotland to really highlight the things that they're doing good, much better, and to make people feel more proud about the things that have been delivered already.
I think Scotland's a very progressive, socially progressive country. I think that there's something, we've got 19 universities, we've got abundance of creativity and talent. We've invented so many things over the generations and gifted the world so many breakthroughs. I think there's something around almost having a second enlightenment. Can we have that in and from Scotland? I think we need to build bridges to each other and show the way that has to happen, because there's so much disconnect around the world. But I think there's also similarities with Scotland and Denmark and others, where we can learn from each other. But I think we are resilient and we are adaptive, and we're not giving up. We're trying to find other ways to make these connections. We're trying to find other ways to nudge government, to nudge business leadership, to nudge capital, so that we can unlock that future that we all imagine. And we have to be looking at this for the next generation, and they demand it of us. I'm maybe reaching the end of my career, well, maybe not, maybe another 20 years. But I've got 3 grown-up children, and they demand of me, what is it you're doing, Dad? What's your legacy? Not just me, but my generation. And I think that we really need to be remembering that we're only custodians of this industry, of this country, while we're here, and we really need to keep on going. And I think we've got a wonderful opportunity in this little nation called Scotland. We punch above our weight in so many different ways, and I think that we have got a huge opportunity to actually make it happen.